Tonight, we walk through doorways that have not known footsteps for centuries. Somewhere in the folds of the earth, in jungles thick with silence, in deserts where the wind speaks in whispers, in mountains that touch the belly of the sky, there are temples. Some stand proud against the horizon, their spires catching the first light of dawn. Others have crumbled into the embrace of the land, their stones scattered like the syllables of a forgotten prayer. And still others wait in darkness, hidden beneath sand or vine, or the simple passage of time. Their altars cold, their sanctuaries still, their gods patient beyond all human measure of patience. This is not a history lesson. It is a pilgrimage, a slow, meditative journey through the sacred spaces that our ancestors built to house the infinite, to honor the invisible, to create a meeting place between the mortal and the eternal. We will not rush. We will not explain away the mystery. We will simply walk and wonder, and let the silence of these holy places seep into the quieting chambers of the mind. The temples we will visit tonight span continents and millennia. Some are famous, their images reproduced on postcards and in documentaries. Others are nearly forgotten, known only to scholars and the devoted few who still make pilgrimage to their weathered stones. But fame and obscurity matter little in the hours before sleep. What matters is the feeling, the sense of standing where countless others have stood, of breathing air that has carried prayers in languages now silent, of touching stone that was placed with devotion by hands that turned to dust long before our grandparents' grandparents were born. Every temple begins with an intention. Someone, somewhere, felt the presence of something sacred and decided that this feeling must be given form. A stone was placed, a wall was raised, a roof was built to shelter the holy from the ordinary weather of the world. And in that act of building, something happened. The space became different from the space around it. It became set apart. It became a threshold. We are about to cross many thresholds tonight. We will enter jungles where temples have been embraced by the patient arms of trees. We will climb mountains where shrines perch on edges that seem to defy gravity itself. We will descend into caves where the first sacred spaces were painted on walls of living rock. We will stand in deserts where sand has buried and revealed the same monuments over and over again, in an endless rhythm of forgetting and remembering. Let the rhythm of these words carry you. Let the images form softly in the darkness behind your closing eyes. There is no test at the end of this journey, no facts to memorize, no dates to remember, There is only the slow unwinding of sacred stories, the gentle accumulation of wonder, the gradual release into the peace that waits at the heart of all holy places. The temples are waiting. They have been waiting for a very long time. They will wait a little longer while you settle into comfort, while your breath slows, while the concerns of the day loosen their grip on your thoughts. And now, let us begin. The first stone has been laid. The first prayer has been spoken. The doorway stands open, and beyond it, the silence of ages invites us in. We begin not with a temple, but with an intention, the ancient, universal impulse to build something sacred upon the earth. Long before architects drew plans on papyrus or parchment, long before priests codified the rituals that would fill sacred halls with chanting and incense, there was simply this: a human being standing in a clearing, feeling the weight of the sky, sensing that this particular place was different from the places around it. Something in the land called out. Something in the air felt charged with presence. And in response to that feeling, wordless perhaps, but undeniable, a stone was lifted and placed upon the ground. This is where all temple building begins. Not with theology, not with doctrine, but with the simple recognition that certain places on the earth feel sacred. The ancients had a word for this quality. The Romans called it genius loci, the spirit of a place. The Greeks spoke of temenos, the sacred precinct, the ground that belonged to the gods. In traditions around the world, from the Aboriginal songlines of Australia to the sacred mountains of Tibet, from the medicine wheels of North America to the holy groves of Celtic Europe, the same understanding appears. The earth is not uniform. Some places pulse with a power that invites reverence. How did our ancestors recognize these places? We cannot fully know. Perhaps they felt a tingling in the skin, a quickening of the heart, a sense of being watched by something vast and invisible. Perhaps the land itself gave signs of spring that never ran dry. A tree that grew in an unusual shape. A rock formation that seemed to point toward the heavens. Perhaps dreams led them there, or visions, or the accumulated wisdom of generations who had noticed that certain spots felt different, felt holy, felt like doorways between the visible world and the invisible one. What we do know is that once a place was recognized as sacred, it was rarely abandoned. The same sites have drawn worshippers for millennia, layer upon layer of devotion, accumulating like sediment. Beneath the great cathedrals of Europe lie the foundations of Roman temples, and beneath those lie older shrines, Celtic and pre-Celtic, reaching back into the mists of prehistory. The Christian churches of Mexico were often built directly upon the pyramids of the Aztecs, which were themselves built upon the ruins of even older structures. Jerusalem, Varanasi, Mecca, these cities have been holy for so long that their origins disappear into legend. The first act of temple building, then, was not construction, but recognition. It was the moment when a human being stopped, looked around, and said, perhaps without words, perhaps with only a sharp intake of breath, here. Here is where the sacred dwells. Here is where we must honor it. And then came the stone. The placing of the first stone is an act of immense significance. Though it may seem simple, it is a declaration. It is a commitment. It says, we will not forget this place. We will mark it so that others may find it. We will begin the work of giving form to the formless, of creating a dwelling for that which has no need of dwellings, but graciously accepts our offerings nonetheless. In many traditions, the laying of a foundation stone is accompanied by elaborate ritual. Prayers are spoken. Offerings are made. The stone itself may be anointed with oil or water or blood, substances that carry symbolic weight, that mark the transition from ordinary matter to sacred object. The moment is witnessed, recorded, remembered. It becomes part of the story that the temple will tell for as long as it stands. But before the ritual, before the witnesses, before the recorded history, there was simply the gesture, a hand lifting a stone, placing it deliberately, stepping back. The first temple builder, whoever they were, wherever they lived, could not have known what would follow. They could not have imagined the great structures that would rise from such humble beginnings, the pyramids and pagodas, the cathedrals and mosques, the ziggurats and stupas that would reshape the skylines of continents. They knew only this: something sacred had been felt, and something must be done in response. The stone was their answer. It was the first word in a conversation that continues to this day, the first note in a song that humanity has never stopped singing. Tonight, as you listen to these words, imagine yourself in that first moment. You stand in a clearing, perhaps a forest clearing, perhaps a desert oasis, perhaps a mountain meadow. The air is still. The light is golden, the hour either dawn or dusk. The threshold times when the boundary between worlds grows thin. You feel something. You cannot name it, but you know it is real. It is the presence that mystics have sought in every age, the numinous, the holy, the utterly other that is somehow also utterly intimate. You look down. At your feet, a stone. It is not remarkable, no special color, no unusual shape. But as you bend to lift it, you feel the weight of what you are about to do. This stone will be the first. After it will come others, and then walls, and then roofs, and then generations of worshipers whose prayers will fill the space you are creating. All of that begins here, begins now, begins with this simple act of placing stone upon earth in recognition of something that cannot be seen but can be felt. You place the stone. The sound it makes as it settles is small, ordinary. But something has shifted. The place is different now. It has been claimed, consecrated, set apart. The temple has begun. Thousands of years later, pilgrims will come. They will not know your name or your face. They will not know the feeling that moved through you in that moment of recognition. But they will feel something of what you felt, standing where you stood, breathing air that carries the memory of your breath. This is the gift of the temple builder, to create a space where the sacred can be encountered, generation after generation, long after the builder has returned to the earth from which they came. And it all begins with a single stone, laid in silence, in a moment when heaven and earth seemed very close indeed. Deep in the forests of Cambodia, where the monsoon rains fall like curtains of silver, and the roots of strangler figs embrace stone with the patience of centuries, there stands a temple that the world forgot. Angkor Wat rises from the jungle floor like a vision, like a dream made solid, like the impossible memory of a god who once walked the earth. Its 5 towers reach toward the sky in perfect symmetry, their silhouettes reflected in the vast moat that surrounds the complex, creating the illusion that 2 temples exist, one pointing upward to heaven, one pointing downward to the underworld, and between them, the thin line of water that separates and connects all worlds. The temple was built in the 12th century by King Suryavarman II, a monarch whose ambition matched his devotion. He dedicated it to Vishnu, the preserver god of the Hindu Trinity, and he designed it as a representation of Mount Meru, the sacred mountain at the center of the universe. Every measurement, every proportion, every carved relief was calculated to align with cosmic principles. The temple is not merely a building, but a model of the cosmos, a 3-dimensional mandala, a stone prayer that speaks in the language of geometry and symbol. At its height, Angkor was the largest city in the world. Nearly 1 million people lived within its greater boundaries, their lives organized around the vast temple complexes that dotted the landscape. The Khmer Empire controlled much of Southeast Asia, and Angkor was its beating heart, a center of religion, politics, art, and trade that drew visitors from as far away as China and India. The wealth that flowed through the city seemed inexhaustible. The power that radiated from its throne seemed eternal. And then, slowly, it all unraveled. The causes of Angkor's decline are still debated by historians. Climate change may have played a role. Prolonged droughts, followed by devastating floods, disrupting the elaborate water management system that sustained the city's agriculture. Wars with neighboring kingdoms took their toll. The shift from Hinduism to Buddhism changed the religious landscape, and the new faith favored simpler, less monumental expressions of devotion. Whatever the reasons, by the 15th century, the great city was largely abandoned. The court moved elsewhere. The population dispersed. The jungle, held at bay for centuries by human effort, began its slow advance. Imagine those first years of abandonment. The last priests performing the last rituals, their voices echoing in galleries that had once rung with the chanting of thousands. The last caretakers sweeping leaves from courtyards, knowing that soon there would be no one to continue their work. The last pilgrims making their final offerings, walking backward out of the sanctuary, reluctant to turn their faces from the divine presence they were leaving behind. And then silence. The footsteps stopped. The chanting ceased. The incense was no longer lit, and the smoke that had risen for centuries toward the heavens rose no more. The jungle did not rush in. It crept. First the grasses, seeding in the cracks between paving stones. Then the bushes, finding purchase in the fertile soil that accumulated in corners and courtyards. Then the trees slowly, tenderly, with a patience that makes human lifetimes seem like heartbeats. The strangler figs were the most dramatic, their seeds deposited by birds on the temple roofs, their roots descending like fingers, like tentacles, like the slow caress of a lover who has all of eternity to complete the embrace. The roots grew into the stones, around the stones, through the stones. They followed the mortar lines, exploiting every weakness, every gap, every opportunity. In some places, the trees now hold the temples together, their roots so intertwined with the masonry that to remove them would bring the walls crashing down. In other places, they have pushed the stones apart, toppling towers, collapsing galleries, reclaiming for the forest what had been taken from it centuries before. For 400 years, Angkor Wat slept beneath its green blanket. It was not entirely forgotten. Local people continued to visit, to pray, to maintain a thin thread of devotion that linked the present to the past. Buddhist monks established a small presence, keeping the most sacred spaces clear of vegetation, performing rituals that adapted the Hindu temple to Theravada practice. But to the wider world, Angkor was unknown. A rumor, a legend whispered by travelers who claimed to have glimpsed towers rising above the forest canopy. Then, in the 19th century, French explorers penetrated the jungle and found what they were not expecting to find: a city of stone, vast beyond imagination, beautiful beyond description, silent as a tomb. The news they brought back astonished Europe. How could such a place have been forgotten? How could a civilization capable of building such monuments have vanished so completely from history? The questions remain unanswered in some fundamental way. We know the facts, now the dates, the kings, the political and religious shifts that led to Angkor's abandonment. But knowing the facts is not the same as understanding the feeling. Standing in the ruins today, watching the morning mist rise through the galleries, listening to the calls of birds that have made their homes in the carved niches, where gods once stood, one feels the mystery intact, undiminished by scholarship, untouched by explanation. Tonight, let us walk through Angkor as dreamers, not as tourists. Let us enter through the western gate, crossing the moat on a causeway lined with stone nagas, the serpent spirits that guard the threshold between worlds. Let us pass through galleries where the entire Ramayana has been carved in relief, the epic story flowing across the walls like a river of stone. Let us climb the steep stairs to the central sanctuary, where the tower rises above the forest canopy, and the first light of dawn catches the lotus bud finials and sets them glowing like flames. The gods are still here. Not the statues, many of those were taken long ago, carried off by kings and colonizers, displayed now in museums far from the jungle that birthed them. But the presence remains. Something in the alignment of the stones, something in the proportions of the spaces, something in the way the light falls through doorways at certain hours of certain days. Something continues to function, continues to do what a temple is meant to do, to provide a meeting place between the human and the divine. The jungle swallowed Angkor, but it did not digest it. The temple endured, transformed by its centuries of sleep, but not destroyed. And now it wakes again, receiving pilgrims from around the world, hearing prayers in languages its builders never knew, serving purposes that have evolved, but not ended. Some sacred places are stronger than the forces that try to claim them. Some temples outlast empires, outlast religions, outlast the very civilizations that built them. Angkor is such a place patient, enduring, waiting in the jungle for the next wave of devotees to cross its ancient moat and climb its worn stairs toward a heaven that has never stopped shining above its silent towers. In the high Andes, where the air is thin and the stars seem close enough to touch, the Inca built a city in the clouds, a sanctuary so secret that the Spanish conquistadors, who destroyed so much of Andean civilization, never found it. Machu Picchu rests on a saddle between two peaks, Huayna Picchu and Machu Picchu Mountain, at an elevation of nearly 8,000 feet above sea level. Below, the Urubamba River carves its ancient path through a canyon so deep that the waters are invisible from above, audible only as a distant murmur, a whisper from the world of the living to the world of the sacred. Above, the Andean sky stretches in an arc of blue so intense it seems painted, its clarity a gift of the thin atmosphere, its stars at night so numerous and bright that the Inca saw in them a river of light, the Milky Way, which they called Mayu, and which they believed carried the souls of the dead to their eternal rest. The city was built in the 15th century, during the height of the Inca Empire, likely under the direction of the Emperor Pachacuti, whose name means earthshaker, and whose reign transformed the Inca from a regional power into the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. Machu Picchu was not a capital or a fortress. It was something rarer, a place of retreat and ritual, a sanctuary where the elite could escape the pressures of administration and warfare and attend to the deeper business of communion with the divine. The Inca left no written records. Their civilization used quipus, knotted strings, for accounting and perhaps for narrative. But the knowledge of how to read them was lost with the conquest. What we know of Machu Picchu comes from archaeology and inference, from the patient reconstruction of context and meaning from stones that no longer speak. And yet, the stones do speak in their own way. The precision of their fitting, the alignment of their structures with celestial events, the care with which water was channeled and spaces were organized, all of this tells a story. Even if we cannot translate every word, the most sacred space in Machu Picchu is the Intihuatana, a carved stone pillar whose name means hitching post of the sun. The stone is positioned so that at the spring and autumn equinoxes, the sun stands directly above it, casting no shadow. The Inca believed that at these moments, The sun was ritually tied to the stone, preventing it from wandering too far north or south, ensuring the return of warmth and life to the world. The ceremony that was performed here has been lost, but the stone remains, its angles still aligned with the celestial mechanics that have not changed since the priests first calibrated their calendar by starlight. When the Spanish came, Machu Picchu was already abandoned, or perhaps it was never fully inhabited after the smallpox and other European diseases swept through the Andes, killing millions and disrupting every aspect of Inca society. The conquistadors never found it. The colonial authorities never recorded it. For 4 centuries, it remained hidden, known only to the farmers who lived in its shadow, who grazed their llamas on its terraces, who kept it secret perhaps by accident, perhaps by intention. In 1911, an American explorer named Hiram Bingham III was led to the site by local guides. He was searching for Vilcabamba, the lost city where the last Inca resistance held out against Spanish rule. What he found instead was Machu Picchu, and though he may not have understood what he had discovered, he understood that it was extraordinary. It seemed like an unbelievable dream, he wrote. What could this place be? The question has never been fully answered. Theories abound. Machu Picchu has been called a royal estate, a religious center, an astronomical observatory, a retreat for chosen women, a citadel of the Inca elite. Each theory explains some of the evidence. None explains all of it. The city keeps its secrets, as it kept them during the centuries of its hiding, as it will keep them long after our theories have been forgotten, and new theories have taken their place. Tonight, let us approach Machu Picchu as the Inca priests approached it slowly, reverently, with the understanding that we are entering a place not entirely meant for us, a sanctuary whose full meaning was known only to those who built it and worshipped within its walls. The path ascends through cloud forest, where orchids bloom in the crooks of trees, and the air is thick with moisture, and the calls of unseen birds. The trail is ancient, its stones worn smooth by centuries of feet pilgrims and priests, emperors and servants, all climbing toward the sacred city above. The altitude makes the breath come short, the heart beat faster. Each step is an effort, and perhaps that is the point, the difficulty of the approach, preparing the body and mind for the revelation that awaits. And then, suddenly, the path opens, the clouds part, and there it is. The city spreads across the ridge like a sculpture, its terraces stepping down the mountainside like a giant staircase, its buildings clustered around plazas and fountains, its walls following the contours of the land as if they grew from the rock rather than being placed upon it. The peaks rise behind it, Huayna standing like a sentinel, its silhouette recognizable from 1,000 photographs, but more powerful in person, more present, more alive. The silence is the first thing you notice. There is wind, there are birds, there is the distant murmur of the river far below, but these sounds only deepen the silence, only make more palpable the absence of the voices that once filled this place. The priests chanting at dawn, the craftsmen shaping stone with stone, the women weaving cloth in courtyards now open to the sky. All of them gone, their lives as invisible as their words, their presence felt only in the perfection of what they left behind. Walk through the empty doorways. Touch the stones that were fitted so precisely that no mortar was needed, that have held together through 5 centuries of earthquakes and storms. Stand at the Intihuatana and feel the sun on your face, the same sun that the Inca worshipped, the same sun that was ritually hitched to this stone at the turning of the seasons. The ceremony is forgotten, but the sun remembers. The stone remembers. And something in you, perhaps, remembers too. Machu Picchu does not explain itself. It does not yield its secrets to cameras or guidebooks. It simply is perfect, mysterious, suspended between earth and sky, between past and present, between the known and the forever unknowable. Some temples teach through words and images. This temple teaches through silence, through beauty, through the ache of standing in a holy place that can be visited but never possessed. In western India, where the Deccan Plateau rises from the coastal plains, there is a temple that was not built, but excavated, carved downward into living rock. A mountain transformed into a shrine through the patient removal of everything that was not sacred. The Kailasa temple at Ellora is perhaps the most ambitious sculptural project in human history. It required the removal of an estimated 200,000 tons of basalt rock, carved from the top down over a period that may have spanned generations. Unlike conventional buildings, which are constructed from the ground up, Kailasa was created by subtraction. The sculptors began at the summit of the rock face and worked their way down, revealing the temple that existed, they believed, within the stone, waiting to be set free. The temple is dedicated to Shiva, the destroyer and transformer of the Hindu Trinity, and it represents his celestial abode on Mount Kailasa in the Himalayas. The structure that emerges from the excavation is not a simple shrine, but a complete temple complex, a main sanctuary, subsidiary shrines, elaborately carved halls, galleries, and courtyards, all connected, all of a piece, all carved from the same mass of volcanic rock that forms the hillside. Standing before Kailasa, the mind struggles to comprehend what the eyes are seeing. The scale is vast. The main temple rises over 90 feet from the floor of the courtyard that surrounds it. Its tower carved with intricate details that seem impossible given the tools available to 8th century craftsmen. The depth is equally impressive to reach the temple's entrance. One descends into a trench that has been cut some 100 feet deep into the rock, creating an artificial canyon whose walls are decorated with monumental sculptures of gods and guardians, elephants and lions, scenes from mythology rendered in stone. How was it done? The question haunts everyone who visits Ellora. The rock is hard basalt, resistant to carving, unforgiving of errors. There is no room for mistakes when working from the top down. A miscalculated cut cannot be corrected, cannot be patched over, cannot be hidden. Every stroke of every chisel had to be precise, had to be planned, had to be part of a vision so complete that it could guide the work of countless hands over countless years without losing coherence. The chisel marks are still visible on the stone, preserved through 12 centuries of monsoons and dry seasons. Running your fingers along the walls, you can feel the grooves where tools bit into rock, where devotion became physical labor, where prayer took the form of sculpture. Each mark represents a moment of effort, a single gesture in a symphony of gestures that accumulated over time into this overwhelming whole. The temple was commissioned by a Rashtrakuta king, probably Krishna I, who ruled in the 8th century. According to legend, the king was gravely ill, and his queen vowed to build a temple to Shiva if her husband recovered. When he did, she asked how quickly the temple could be completed, and the architect replied that it could be done rapidly if they carved from the top down. The queen agreed, and the work began. Legend, of course, simplifies. The actual construction likely took decades, perhaps the better part of a century, involving thousands of workers whose names are lost to history. They were not slaves. The evidence suggests that temple building in medieval India was performed by guilds of skilled craftsmen, specialists in different aspects of the work, who moved from project to project across the subcontinent. These were artisans professionals, people who had dedicated their lives to the art of transforming stone into devotion. Tonight, let us descend into the carved darkness of Ellora. Let us enter as pilgrims entered, moving from the brightness of the plateau into the shadows of the excavated canyon, feeling the temperature drop as the walls rise around us, cutting off the sun, creating a world apart from the world above. The first thing you notice is the elephants. Life-sized stone elephants line the base of the temple, appearing to support it on their backs. They are carved with remarkable naturalism, their skin wrinkled, their trunks curled, their eyes wise with the patience that elephants are believed to possess. In Hindu mythology, elephants are associated with rain, with fertility, with the stability that allows the universe to continue. Here, they perform their eternal duty, holding up the abode of the gods. Above the elephants, the walls explode with imagery. Gods and demons, sages and celestial beings, scenes from the great epics carved in relief, their figures seeming to move, to dance, to breathe despite their stone stillness. Here is Shiva in his aspect as Nataraja, the lord of the dance, whose cosmic performance creates and destroys worlds. Here is Vishnu reclining on the serpent of infinity, dreaming the universe into existence. Here are the demons Ravana and his army, attempting to shake Mount Kailasa, thwarted by the god who sits unmoved at the peak. You climb the steps to the main shrine, passing through a porch supported by massive carved pillars. The darkness deepens. The sounds of the outside world fade. You are entering the Garbhagriha, the womb house, the innermost chamber where the sacred image resides. In the center of the chamber, barely visible in the dim light that filters through the doorway, stands the lingam, the aniconic representation of Shiva. A smooth stone cylinder rising from a circular base. There are no faces here, no carved features, no human form. The lingam is pure symbol, pure presence, the irreducible essence of the divine stripped of all ornament and elaboration. The contrast is striking. Outside, the temple is covered with images, thousands of figures, intricate patterns, elaborate decorations that seem to fill every available surface. Inside, in the holiest space, there is only simplicity, only the stone, only the presence that needs no face, no form, no representation to make itself known. This is the teaching of the temple. The outer complexity leads inward toward inner simplicity. The carved abundance of the exterior prepares the devotee for the carved absence of the interior. All the images, All the stories, all the gods and demons are pointing towards something beyond image and story, the formless source from which all forms arise, the silence beneath all sound, the darkness from which all light emerges. 200,000 tons of stone were removed to create this emptiness, this void at the heart of the mountain. The sculptors carved everything away until nothing remained but the essential, the lingam in the darkness, the presence in the absence, the God who dwells not in the stone, but in the space the stone creates. Close your eyes now and feel that darkness. Feel the carved silence of Ellora surrounding you, holding you, inviting you into the stillness at the center of all sacred things. The desert remembers what the wind forgets. Beneath the dunes of Egypt, beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, beneath the parched earth of forgotten oases, temples lie buried, some discovered, most still hidden, all waiting. There is a rhythm to the desert that those who live in greener lands rarely understand. The wind blows and the sand moves. Dunes shift, sometimes by inches, sometimes by miles. What was exposed yesterday may be buried tomorrow. What was buried for centuries may emerge briefly before the sand claims it again. The desert is not static, it breathes, it flows, it conceals and reveals according to patterns that human beings can observe but never control. The great civilizations that arose in desert lands understood this rhythm. They built their temples not merely to withstand time, but to withstand the more immediate threat of burial. They raised their monuments on high ground, oriented their entrances to avoid the prevailing winds, stationed armies of priests and servants to keep the sacred spaces clear. But empires fall, priesthoods disperse, and the sand eventually has its way. Abu Simbel stands at the southern edge of Egypt, where the Nile flows through Nubia before entering the desert. The temple was carved directly into the sandstone cliffs by order of Rameses the Great, the pharaoh who reigned for 66 years, who fathered over 100 children, who was so determined to be remembered that he inscribed his name on nearly every monument in Egypt, including many that his predecessors had built. 4 colossal statues of the pharaoh guard the entrance, each one over 60 feet tall, each one carved from the living rock of the cliff face. They have sat here for over 3,000 years, their expression serene, their gaze fixed on the eastern horizon, where the sun rises each morning to illuminate the inner sanctuary. Twice a year, at dawn on the equinoxes, a shaft of sunlight penetrates the darkness of the temple and falls upon the faces of the gods within Amun-Ra, Ra-Horakhti, and the deified Rameses himself, sitting in eternal council in the darkness. But for centuries, none of this could be seen. The sand had come, grain by grain, year by year, until the temple was buried almost to the crowns of its colossal guardians. The local people knew something was there, a massive head protruding from the dune, features weathered but unmistakable. But the world had forgotten Abu Simbel, as it had forgotten so much of ancient Egypt, as it had forgotten that the desert was once the cradle of civilization. In 1813, a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt stumbled upon the site. He saw the heads rising from the sand, recognized their significance, but could not excavate them himself. It would be another 4 years before the Italian explorer Giovanni Belzoni organized a dig, clearing enough sand to reveal the doorway, to enter the darkness that had been sealed for over 1,000 years. What they found inside astonished them. The colors were still vivid on the walls, protected by the sand from the sun that would have faded them. The carvings were as sharp as the day they were made, depicting Rameses in battle, Rameses receiving tribute, Rameses worshipping the gods who were, in truth, aspects of himself. The inner sanctuary, with its 4 seated figures, had not been disturbed since the last priest extinguished the last lamp and walked away, leaving the gods to their eternal darkness. The story of Abu Simbel is the story of all desert temples' burial and resurrection, forgetting and remembering, the endless dance between human ambition and natural indifference. Rameses built to be remembered, and for a time he was. Then he was forgotten. Then he was remembered again. The cycle continues and will continue as long as the wind blows and the sand shifts and human beings retain their hunger to find what has been lost. Further east, in the deserts of Syria, another temple once stood at the crossroads of empires. Palmyra was an oasis city, a stopping point on the caravan routes that connected Rome to Persia, east to west, silk and spices to silver and gold. Its Temple of Bel was one of the wonders of the ancient world, a vast complex dedicated to the Mesopotamian god, whose name means Lord, whose worship spread across the ancient Near East in various forms, whose temple at Palmyra represented a fusion of Greek, Roman, and Syrian architectural traditions. The temple survived the fall of Rome, the rise of Islam, the Crusades, the Mongol invasions. It stood for nearly 2,000 years, weathering the desert winds, sheltering Bedouin tribes who made their camps in its courtyards, attracting travelers who marveled at its scale and grandeur. The sand threatened it, as sand threatens all desert monuments, but human reverence kept it clear, kept it standing, kept it serving as a landmark and a refuge in the vast emptiness of the Syrian desert. And then, in our own time, it was destroyed not by nature, but by human hands, not by the slow erosion of centuries, but by the sudden violence of ideology. The loss of the Temple of Bel is a wound that scholars and devotees of history will feel for generations. What the desert could not bury, what time could not erode, was erased in moments by those who feared the power of the ancient, who could not tolerate the presence of gods they did not control. But destruction is not the end of the story. The photographs remain. The memories remain. The fragments that were scattered can be studied, analyzed, perhaps one day reassembled. And the desert remains, patient as always, willing to receive whatever remains of what was lost, willing to cover and preserve, and perhaps, in some distant century, reveal again what has been buried. Tonight, let us hold both images, the temple buried and the temple destroyed, the sand that conceals and the hands that demolish. Both are part of the story of sacred places. Both remind us that nothing built is permanent, that every temple exists in a state of negotiation with the forces that would claim it back. Somewhere in the desert tonight, a column is emerging from a dune. The wind has shifted, the sand has moved, and stone that has not seen starlight for centuries is slowly appearing, inch by inch, grain by grain. No one may be there to see it. The desert keeps its revelations private, sharing them only with those who happen to pass at the right moment, who happen to look in the right direction, who happen to recognize the significance of a shape in the sand. The temples wait. They have been waiting for a very long time. They will wait longer still, through cycles of burial and emergence, forgetting and remembering, destruction and reconstruction. The sand shifts, the wind blows, and beneath it all, the sacred endures patient, silent, confident that its time will come again. In the golden light of Myanmar, where the Irrawaddy River winds through plains of ancient pagodas, there is a temple that seems to defy the laws of earth and gravity, a massive boulder crowned by a small stupa, balanced on the edge of a cliff, held in place by faith alone. Kayaktiyo, known to the world as the Golden Rock, rests on a ledge of Mount Kayaktiyo in eastern Myanmar, tilted at an angle that appears to defy physics. The boulder is approximately 25 feet in circumference, covered entirely in gold leaf applied by countless pilgrims over countless generations. At its summit sits a small stupa, 7.5 meters tall, housing what believers say is a single hair of the Buddha, a relic of such power that it holds the massive stone in place, preventing it from tumbling into the valley below. The legend tells that the hair was given to a hermit by the Buddha himself during one of his visits to Myanmar. The hermit carried the relic in his topknot for years, seeking a boulder shaped like his own head on which to enshrine it. When he found the stone at Kayaktiyo, he enlisted the help of the king, who possessed supernatural powers and was able to retrieve the perfect rock from the bottom of the sea. The stone was transported through the air to its present location, where it has balanced ever since, held by the power of the sacred hair. Science offers other explanations, of course. Geologists point to the particular composition of the rock, to the way the underlying ledge supports its weight, to the centuries of gold leaf that have filled cracks and stabilized the surface. They speak of angles and vectors, of gravity and friction, of the natural processes that can create formations that appear miraculous, but are merely unusual. But tonight, we are not scientists. We are pilgrims, approaching the golden rock as pilgrims have approached it for over 1,000 years on foot, in faith, with the understanding that some things need not be explained to be experienced, need not be understood to be true. The journey begins at the base of Mount Kayaktiyo, where trucks and buses deposit visitors for the final ascent. The path winds upward through forest, past shrines and rest houses, past vendors selling offerings and souvenirs, past pilgrims of all ages making their way toward the summit. Some walk, some are carried in sedan chairs, some climb on hands and knees, their progress a prayer, their effort an offering. The air grows cooler as you climb. The sounds of the valley fade. The forest thins, and glimpses of the rock begin to appear through the trees' golden flashes, catching the sunlight, promising what lies ahead. The anticipation builds with each step, each turn in the path, each moment of exertion that brings you closer to the goal. And then you arrive. The first sight of the golden rock at close range is overwhelming. It is larger than you expected, more golden, more impossible. It truly appears to float, to hang in space, to defy every rule of how heavy things behave. The gap beneath it, the visible space between the boulder's base and the cliff's edge seems to dare you to disbelieve, to dismiss what your eyes are telling you, to explain away the miracle. Pilgrims crowd around the rock, pressing their foreheads to its golden surface, attaching squares of gold leaf to its sides, murmuring prayers in a language you may not understand, but whose meaning is universal. They come from all over Myanmar and beyond, monks in saffron robes, families with small children, elderly devotees who have made this pilgrimage many times before, and young visitors experiencing it for the first time. There is a restriction at Kyaiktiyo that is observed nowhere else in Buddhist pilgrimage. Women are not permitted to touch the rock itself. They must remain at a distance, separated from the boulder by a barrier, applying their gold leaf through male intermediaries, or simply offering their devotion from afar. The rule is controversial, discussed, and debated, but it is also traditional, woven into the fabric of the site's sacred history. The women who come here accept it, not necessarily with agreement, but with the understanding that sacred places often have their own rules, their own logic, their own requirements that may not align with the values of the modern world. As the sun sets, the rock catches fire. The gold leaf, which has been absorbing light all day, begins to glow from within, transforming the boulder into a beacon, a flame, a solid piece of captured sunlight balanced on the edge of darkness. The small stupa at its summit is silhouetted against the evening sky, pointing upward toward the first appearing stars. This is the hour when the magic is strongest. In the gathering dusk, the boulder seems to hover more obviously, its connection to the earth more tenuous, its defiance of gravity more pronounced. The pilgrims fall quiet, their prayers becoming whispers, their attention drawn upward to the impossible stone and its impossible balance. The single hair of the Buddha, if it exists, if it is really there, sealed within the stupa's reliquary, has been holding this stone in place for over a millennium. A single hair, a strand of keratin, no different in composition from any human hair, yet transformed by its origin, by its association with enlightenment, by the faith of millions who believe in its power. This is the mystery of relics, the mystery of sacred objects. A hair is just a hair until it is the Buddha's hair. A rock is just a rock until faith transforms it into a miracle. The transformation is not physical. The hair does not change. The rock does not change. What changes is the relationship between the object and those who perceive it. What changes is meaning. And meaning, in the end, may be the most powerful force in the universe. It is meaning that holds communities together, meaning that inspires sacrifice and devotion, meaning that makes human beings climb mountains and cross oceans and kneel before stones in the hope of touching something greater than themselves. Tonight, let the golden rock float in your imagination. Let its impossible balance teach you something about the impossible balances we all maintain between doubt and faith, between reason and wonder, between the weight of the world and the lightness of spirit that allows us to carry it. Some things are held up by physics. Some things are held up by prayer. And perhaps, in the end, the two are not so different as we think. Beneath the visible structures of ancient temples, there are often hidden spaces, crypts, and passages, chambers sealed for centuries, labyrinths whose purposes have been forgotten, but whose presence continues to shape the sacred architecture above. The impulse to build downward is as ancient as the impulse to build upward. Just as towers reach toward heaven, tunnels reach toward the underworld, that realm of the dead, of the ancestors, of the chthonic powers that dwell beneath the surface of the earth. A temple without a basement is incomplete, a body without roots, a tree that might topple in the first strong wind. On the island of Malta, in the central Mediterranean, there is an underground temple that predates the pyramids of Egypt by over 1,000 years. The hypogeum of Hal Saflieni was carved from limestone over many centuries, beginning around 4,000 BCE, and it served as both temple and necropolis, a place where the living came to worship and the dead came to rest. The structure descends through 3 levels, each one deeper, darker, more mysterious than the one above. The upper level, closest to the surface, contains burial chambers that may have been natural caves, expanded and elaborated by human hands. The middle level is more architectural, more deliberately designed, its chambers carved to resemble the above-ground temples that the same culture built on Malta's surface. The lowest level reaches over 30 feet below the surface, a realm of darkness where no natural light has penetrated for 6,000 years. What happened in these underground chambers? We can only guess. The remains of over 7,000 individuals have been found in the hypogeum, their bones mingled together in collective burials, their identities merged in death as they may have been distinct in life. But the space was not merely a cemetery. It was decorated, painted with spirals and ochre patterns, carved with reliefs that suggest ritual significance, designed to create acoustic effects that may have enhanced chanting or drumming or other forms of sacred sound. One chamber, known as the oracle room, has a peculiar property. When a voice speaks from a specific niche in the wall, the sound resonates through the entire complex, amplified and transformed, taking on an otherworldly quality. A voice that is human becomes something more than human, something that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, from the stones themselves, from the dead who sleep in the surrounding chambers. Far away in central Mexico, another underground labyrinth extends beneath one of the greatest monuments of the ancient Americas. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan rises over 200 feet above the Avenue of the Dead, its massive bulk visible for miles across the Valley of Mexico. But beneath it, hidden from the thousands of tourists who climb its steps each year, there is a cave, a natural tunnel that may have determined the entire layout of the ancient city. The tunnel runs for over 300 feet, ending in a chamber that has been shaped by human hands into a four-lobed clover pattern. When archaeologists first explored this space in the 1970s, they found offerings shells from distant oceans, mirrors made of polished pyrite, objects of jade and obsidian. The cave had been sacred, a place of pilgrimage, perhaps the original reason why Teotihuacan was built where it was built. In Mesoamerican cosmology, caves were entrances to Xibalba, the underworld, the realm of the dead, of the gods of death, of the forces that had to be appeased if the living were to flourish. A pyramid built over a cave was therefore doubly powerful, connecting the heights of heaven with the depths of the underworld, creating a vertical axis that linked all realms of existence. We do not know what rituals were performed in the cave beneath the Pyramid of the Sun. The people of Teotihuacan left no written records that we can read. Their language, their beliefs, even their name for themselves, remain unknown. They vanished around the 7th century, leaving their great city to be discovered and wondered at by the Aztecs, who found it abandoned and gave it the name we still use, Teotihuacan, the place where the gods were made. Tonight, let us descend. Let us leave the surface world with its sunlight and certainty, and enter the darkness that waits below. The passage is narrow. You must crouch, must sometimes crawl, must feel your way forward with hands outstretched, touching walls that have been smoothed by the passage of countless bodies over countless years. The air is different here, cool, damp, heavy, with the smell of stone and earth. The sounds of the surface fade until there is only your own breathing, your own heartbeat, the soft scrape of your movement against the tunnel walls. You are entering a realm that belongs to the dead. This is not a metaphor. The bones of ancestors are here, have been here for millennia, their flesh long dissolved, their spirits, if spirits there are, merged with the darkness that surrounds them. You are walking among the departed, sharing their space, breathing their air, touching the same stones they touched when they came here to pray or to die, or to perform rituals whose meaning has been lost. The darkness is absolute. No light penetrates here. No star has ever shone in this space. The only light is what you have brought with you: a torch, a lamp, a flame that flickers against the pressing dark. The shadows move as you move, giving the illusion of company, the suggestion of presences just beyond the reach of your illumination. In the deepest chamber, you stop. The space opens around you, the ceiling rising, the walls receding. You are in the heart of the labyrinth, the innermost sanctum, the place where the mysteries were performed. What were those mysteries? What did the priests teach to the initiates who descended here? What transformation occurred in the darkness? What knowledge was transmitted? What power was received? The answers are lost. The priests are dead. Their teachings died with them. The initiates who emerged from these passages, changed in ways we cannot understand, are dust now, their experiences as inaccessible as the experiences of the dead they joined in the darkness. But the darkness remains. The labyrinth remains. The space that was created for mystery still exists, still holds its potential, still waits for someone to enter with the right questions, the right openness, the right willingness to meet the unknown on its own terms. We cannot know what the ancients knew, but we can feel what they felt: the cool air, the pressing dark, the sense of descending below the world we know into a world we can only sense. Tonight, in the labyrinth of sleep, you make a similar descent. You leave the light of waking. You enter the darkness of dream. You trust that the passages will lead somewhere, that the darkness is not empty, that something waits to be found in the depths. Before the pyramids rose in Egypt, before the first cities of Mesopotamia were founded, before writing preserved the names of kings or the words of prayers, there was Göbekli Tepe, a temple complex so ancient that it challenges everything we thought we knew about the origins of civilization. The site sits on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey, overlooking the plains of Haran, where tradition says Abraham was born, where the ancient trade routes crossed, East and West have met and mingled since before there was an East and West to distinguish. For thousands of years, the hill was known to local farmers as Potbelly Hill, a rounded mound covered with scattered stones, too rocky for cultivation, useful only for grazing sheep. In 1963, a survey by the University of Istanbul noted that the stones on the hilltop were not natural. They had been worked, shaped, placed deliberately. But the significance of this observation was not understood until decades later, when a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt began systematic excavation and revealed what lay beneath the surface. What Schmidt found defied conventional understanding of human history. Göbekli Tepe is a complex of massive stone circles, each one containing T-shaped pillars carved from limestone, some of them over 15 feet tall and weighing many tons. The pillars are decorated with reliefs of animals, lions, bulls, boars, foxes, snakes, scorpions, vultures rendered with remarkable skill and expressiveness. Some pillars bear anthropomorphic features, arms carved on their sides, suggesting that they represent human figures, perhaps ancestors, perhaps deities, perhaps forces that the builders sought to invoke or appease. The carvings are remarkable, but what is truly astonishing is the date. Radiocarbon testing places the construction of Göbekli Tepe between 9,500 and 8,000 BCE, over 11,000 years ago. This is nearly 7,000 years before the Great Pyramid of Giza, 5,000 years before Stonehenge, 3,000 years before the earliest known cities. At the time Göbekli Tepe was built, according to conventional archaeology, humans were hunter-gatherers, living in small nomadic bands, without the social organization or the surplus resources necessary to undertake monumental construction. And yet, here it is, massive, deliberate, undeniably the product of coordinated effort on a scale that should have been impossible for the era. Someone, many someones, over many generations quarried these stones, carved these reliefs, transported these pillars to this hilltop, and arranged them in circles whose purpose we can only guess. How did they do it? We do not know. The tools of the era were stone, bone, and wood, no metal, no wheels, no draft animals. The logistics of moving multi-ton pillars up a hillside with such technology beggars imagination. And yet the evidence is there, carved in stone, refusing to be explained away. Why did they do it? This question is even more difficult. There is no settlement at Göbekli Tepe, no houses, no workshops, no granaries or storage facilities. The site was not a village. It was something else. The current theory, proposed by Schmidt before his death, is that Göbekli Tepe was a religious center, a place of pilgrimage, where hunter-gatherer bands from across the region gathered at certain times of the year to perform rituals, to feast, to renew social bonds, and to worship at a sanctuary that belonged to no single group, but to all. If this is true, it reverses our understanding of causation in human development. We have long believed that agriculture came first, that settled farming communities created surplus food, which allowed specialization of labor, which enabled some people to become priests and builders rather than farmers and hunters. But Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite, that religion came first, that the desire to build temples created the need for settled communities, that we did not build temples because we had agriculture, but developed agriculture because we wanted to build temples. This is a profound reframing of human nature. It suggests that the impulse to worship, to create sacred space, to honor forces beyond ourselves, is not a luxury that civilization affords, but a driving force that made civilization possible. We are, it seems, worshiping animals before we are farming animals. We are temple builders before we are city builders. The sacred precedes the secular. Tonight, let us visit Göbekli Tepe in the hour before dawn, when the site is empty and the stars are still visible in the lightening sky. The pillars rise from the earth like figures frozen in an ancient dance. Their surfaces catch the first light, the carved animals seeming to move, to breathe, to watch you with eyes that have been watching for 11,000 years. The foxes are still sly. The lions are still fierce. The vultures still circle on wings of stone, patient as death itself. You walk among them, touching the cool limestone, tracing the reliefs with your fingers. Who carved this snake? Whose hand held the chisel that shaped this boar? What did they believe about the world, about themselves, about the forces they were invoking with these images? The answers are lost, irretrievably lost, buried not in the earth, but in the unbridgeable gap between their minds and ours. And yet, something connects us. They were human as we are human. They looked up at the same stars. We see different constellations, perhaps. The sky having shifted over millennia, but the same burning points of light, the same vast darkness, the same sense of insignificance before the infinite that drives human beings to create, to worship, to build monuments that will outlast their brief lives. What did they know that we have forgotten? The question haunts everyone who visits Göbekli Tepe. There is a sense impossible to shake that we are looking at evidence of knowledge that has been lost, not just the techniques of construction, not just the meanings of the symbols, but something deeper, something about who we are and why we are here that our ancestors knew and we have forgotten. Perhaps we are wrong. Perhaps they knew less than we do, not more. Perhaps the grandeur of Göbekli Tepe is simply the product of human effort accumulated over generations. The same patience that eventually produced the pyramids and the cathedrals. The same hunger for transcendence that has driven every religious tradition. Or perhaps, and this is the possibility that whispers most insistently in the silence of the pre-dawn, perhaps they knew something essential, something we have paved over with progress, something that the stone circles still remember, still teach to those who know how to listen. The pillars stand, the carvings endure, and the questions they raise will outlast every answer we might offer. Along the coasts of the world, temples stand at the edge of erosion, their foundations slowly surrendering to the patient work of waves. Some have already been claimed. Others wait, knowing that their time will come. We have already visited Mahabalipuram, where the 7 pagodas sank beneath the Bay of Bengal, leaving only the shore temple standing witness to what was lost. But Mahabalipuram is not alone. Every coastline in the world has sacred sites that the sea is slowly claiming, monuments that were built on solid ground and now find themselves negotiating with the waves. In Cornwall, at the southwestern tip of England, the chapel of St. Michael perches on a tidal island called the Mount. At high tide, the island is cut off from the mainland, accessible only by boat. At low tide, a causeway emerges, a stone path that pilgrims have walked for centuries to reach the sanctuary at the summit. But the causeway is lower than it once was. The tides reach higher. Each year, the window for crossing grows shorter, the water more insistent, the island more isolated. The monks who first built on St. Michael's Mount understood that they were choosing a liminal place, a threshold between land and sea, between the solid world and the fluid one, between the realm of everyday life and the realm of spiritual retreat. The difficulty of reaching the island was not a flaw, it was a feature. The sacred should not be too accessible. The journey should require effort, sacrifice, a willingness to wait for the right moment. But what happens when the right moment no longer comes? What happens when the tides rise so high that the causeway is never exposed? When the island becomes permanently cut off? When the only access is by boat, even at the lowest tide? The chapel will still stand for a time. The stone will still hold, but the relationship between the shrine and the pilgrims will change. And with it, something of the shrine's meaning will change as well. In Japan, the island of Miyajima hosts one of the most photographed sacred sites in the world, the Great Torii Gate of Itsukushima Shrine, standing in the water of Hiroshima Bay. The gate appears to float on the surface at high tide, its vermilion pillars reflected in the calm water, its form a perfect circle of red against the blue of sea and sky. At low tide, visitors can walk out to the gate, touch its ancient wood, leave offerings in the sand around its base. The shrine was built in the 6th century, and the torii has been replaced many times over the centuries, each reconstruction faithful to the original design. The current gate dates only to 1875 young by the standards of Japanese sacred architecture, but already showing the strains of its position. The salt water corrodes, the waves undermine, the typhoons that sweep through the inland see every autumn pound against the structure, testing its strength, probing for weakness. The Japanese have a concept wabi-sabi that finds beauty in impermanence, in the marks of time, in the slow transformation of all things toward dissolution. A tea bowl is more beautiful for its chips and cracks, its evidence of use and age. A temple is more sacred for its weathered wood, its mossy stones, its gentle lean toward the earth from which it rose. Preservation is not the goal, acceptance is. The torii will fall someday. It will be rebuilt. It will fall again. This is the way of things. But acceptance becomes harder when the forces of dissolution accelerate. Climate change is raising sea levels around the world, not by inches per century, as in earlier ages, but by feet per century, as the great ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica surrender their frozen water to the warming seas. The temples that have stood at the edge for millennia are finding the edge moving toward them, the buffer zones shrinking, the time between storms growing shorter. On the island of Tangier, in the Chesapeake Bay, a community that has existed since the 17th century is watching its home disappear. The island is eroding by 15 feet per year in some places, its land area shrinking, its cemetery washing into the bay, the graves of ancestors becoming part of the seafloor. The church that has served the community for generations stands ever closer to the water. Services continue, but the question of how much longer the church can survive, how much longer the island itself can survive, hangs over every prayer. In the Pacific, entire island nations face similar fates. Tuvalu, Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, these are countries measured not in thousands of square miles, but in hundreds, not in mountains and valleys, but in coral atolls, barely higher than the highest tides. The temples of these islands, the churches established by missionaries, the sacred sites maintained by indigenous traditions, all of them are threatened. All of them are negotiating with a sea that has no interest in negotiation. Tonight, let us hold this tension, the beauty of temples by the sea and the sorrow of their impending loss. Let us feel both the rightness of impermanence and the grief of watching sacred places dissolve. Imagine a temple at the edge of a cliff, looking out over water that stretches to the horizon. The stone is ancient, weathered by centuries of salt and wind. The walls bear the marks of countless hands that have touched them in reverence. The altar holds flowers placed this morning, their fragrance mixing with the smell of the sea. Below, the waves crash against the base of the cliff. They have been crashing for millennia, each wave removing a grain of rock, each tide pulling a little more of the foundation into the sea. The process is too slow to see, but not too slow to know. This temple will fall. Not today, not this year, perhaps not this century, but eventually, inevitably, the cliff will crumble and the walls will follow, and what was sacred space will become seabed. Is this tragedy or transformation? Is it loss or return? The temple was built from stone that came from the earth. The earth is merely taking back what was borrowed. The prayers that were spoken here do not depend on the walls. They were released into the air, carried by wind to wherever prayers go. The devotion that was offered here does not depend on the altar. It lives in the hearts of those who offered it, in the memories of those who witnessed it, in the chain of tradition that will continue long after this particular building has returned to the elements. The sea claims what the sea will claim. The temples that remain are gifts, borrowed time, sacred spaces that exist for now, but not forever. Perhaps knowing this makes them more precious, not less. Perhaps standing in a temple at the edge of the sea, hearing the waves that will eventually claim it, is itself a form of worship, an acceptance of impermanence, a gratitude for presence, a willingness to love what we cannot keep. Before temples were built, caves were sacred. In the darkness beneath the earth, our ancestors painted images of animals and spirits handprints, and symbols, creating galleries of worship that would remain hidden for tens of thousands of years. The painted caves of Europe, Lascaux in France, Altamira in Spain, Chauvet in the Ardèche, are among the oldest examples of human artistic expression, and they are also among the oldest sacred spaces we know. The paintings date back 20,000 years and more, to the depths of the last ice age, when glaciers covered much of the northern hemisphere and small bands of humans survived by hunting the great herds of animals that roamed the tundra. What drove these people to crawl into the darkness, to navigate narrow passages that required squeezing through gaps barely wider than a human body, to create images in chambers that no natural light ever reached? The effort required was immense. The pigments ochre, manganese, charcoal had to be prepared and carried into the depths. The surfaces had to be prepared, sometimes smoothed, sometimes left rough to give texture to the images. The artists worked by the light of small lamps, their flickering flames casting shadows that must have made the animals seem to move, to breathe, to live. These were not idle decorations. They were not art for art's sake, not expressions of aesthetic pleasure alone. They were something else, something closer to magic, to ritual, to the attempt to influence forces beyond human control. The caves were temples. The paintings were prayers. At Lascaux, discovered in 1940 by 4 teenagers and a dog, the Great Hall of the Bulls takes the breath away. Enormous aurochs, wild cattle over 15 feet long, charge across the curved walls, their muscles tense, their eyes wide, their presence overwhelming. Horses gallop among them, deer leap. A mysterious beast with 2 horns that does not correspond to any known species stands enigmatic in a corner. The ceiling and walls are covered with figures, overlapping, interacting, creating a pageant of animal life that must have seemed, in the torchlight of the original viewers, almost unbearably vivid. At Altamira, called the Sistine Chapel of Prehistory, bison crowd the ceiling of a low chamber, painted with such skill that when the site was first announced in 1880, many scholars refused to believe the paintings were ancient. They were too good, too sophisticated, too psychologically acute. The bison are not static. They are caught in motion, in rest, in states of alertness and calm. They are individuals, each one different from the others, each one painted with attention to the particular curve of horn, the specific pattern of fur. At Chauvet, the oldest of the great painted caves, lions prowl and rhinoceroses lower their horns. The paintings here are over 30,000 years old, created by Homo sapiens, who had only recently arrived in Europe, who were sharing the continent with Neanderthals, who lived in a world so different from ours that we can barely imagine it. And yet, their art is fully human, fully realized, fully capable of moving us across the unbridgeable gulf of millennia. What did the caves mean to those who painted them? We will never know with certainty. The painters left no texts, no explanations, no guide for later generations. They assumed, perhaps, that anyone who would see the paintings would share their understanding, would know what the images meant without being told. They could not have imagined us people from a future so distant that the ice has melted. The great herds have vanished. The entire context of their lives has disappeared. And yet, something translates. Standing in a painted cave or viewing photographs, since the originals are now mostly closed to protect them from the damage that human presence causes, we feel something. Not understanding, but recognition. Something in us responds to the power of the images, to the care with which they were made, to the devotion that led someone into the darkness 30,000 years ago to create beauty where no one would see it. Tonight, let us enter the cave. Let us crawl through the narrow passage, feeling the cool rock against our skin, smelling the mineral dampness of the underground. Let us follow the footsteps of those who came before, and they did leave footsteps preserved in the clay of cave floors, children's footprints alongside adults, evidence that these were not solitary pilgrimages, but communal experiences, teaching journeys, initiations. The light from your lamp catches the first painting a horse, perhaps, its mane flowing, its eye round and alert. The pigment gleams, as fresh as the day it was applied, protected by the stable environment of the cave from all the forces that would have faded or destroyed it on the surface. The horse is looking at you, has been looking, waiting for 30,000 years. You move deeper. More animals appear a pride of lions, their mouths open, their bodies tense with the moment before the pounce. A herd of reindeer crossing a river, the water suggested by wavy lines beneath their hooves. A mammoth, its trunk raised, its tusks curving, its enormous bulk rendered with a few sure lines. The cave becomes a bestiary, an encyclopedia of the Ice Age world, a preservation of life that has otherwise entirely disappeared. And then, in the deepest chamber, something else. A handprint, red ochre pressed against the rock, then removed, leaving the negative space, the outline of fingers, the shape of a human hand reaching out across the millennia. This is not an animal, this is us. This is someone saying, I was here, I existed, I touched this wall, and something of me remains. The handprint is the oldest signature in the world. It is the first mark of human individuality, the first assertion of self in the face of the vast indifference of time. The person who left it is gone, utterly gone, their bones dissolved, their name never recorded, but their hand remains pressed into stone, waiting for someone to see it, to recognize it, to place their own hand against it, and feel the connection that spans the abyss. In the darkness of the cave, place your hand against the print. Feel the cool rock, the contours that almost match your own. You are touching something sacred, not a god or a doctrine, but something more fundamental. You are touching evidence of the human spirit, reaching across time, refusing to be forgotten. This is the oldest temple. This is where the sacred began. Not all temples are made of stone. In the traditions of Tibet, of India, of the Aboriginal Australians, sacred spaces can be created through sound, through chant and mantra, through the vibration of voice and instrument, through frequencies that transform ordinary space into something holy. The idea is ancient and nearly universal. That sound has creative power, that the right sounds spoken in the right way can bring things into being, can open doorways, can transform the one who speaks and the space in which the sounds are spoken. In the beginning was the Word, says the Gospel of John. Om is the sound of the universe, says Hindu tradition. The songlines of Australia literally sing the land into existence, creating geography through melody, mapping terrain through tune. In Tibet, the monastery bells ring before dawn, calling the monks to practice. They gather in the prayer hall, their robes the color of autumn leaves, their breath visible in the cold mountain air. And then the chanting begins low, resonant, seeming to come not from individual throats, but from the earth itself, from the mountains that surround the monastery, from the depths of time. Tibetan chanting employs a technique called overtone singing, in which a single voice produces multiple notes simultaneously. The effect is otherworldly, a fundamental tone, anchoring the sound to the human body, while harmonics float above it like spirits released from matter. In a hall full of monks practicing this technique, the air becomes thick with sound, layered with frequencies that seem to bypass the ears and enter directly into the bones. The chants are not merely beautiful, they they are functional. According to Tibetan Buddhist teaching, the sounds are mantras, sacred syllables that carry specific energies, that invoke specific presences, that create specific effects in the mind and body of the practitioner. Om Mani Padme Hum, the most famous Tibetan mantra, is not a sentence with a translatable meaning, but a formula, a key, a tool for transformation. To speak, it is to participate in something larger than language, something that operates below or beyond the level of meaning. The prayer hall becomes a temple not because of its walls or its altar, but because of the sound that fills it. Remove the sound, and it is merely a room with statues. Add the sound, and it becomes a portal, a threshold, a place where the boundary between the mundane and the sacred grows thin. The temple is built anew every morning with the first note of the first chant, and it dissolves every evening when the last note fades into silence. In India, the tradition of Nada Yoga, the yoga of sound, teaches that the entire universe is vibration, that matter is simply condensed sound, that the distinction between solid and fluid, between object and wave, is an illusion created by limited perception. The yogi who masters sound can perceive this underlying unity, can hear the cosmic hum that sustains all things, can attune their own vibration to the vibration of the divine. The temples of India employ sound deliberately, architecturally. The Garbhagriha, the inner sanctum where the deity resides, is often designed with acoustic properties in mind-low ceilings, curved walls, surfaces that reflect and amplify sound in specific ways. The ringing of bells, the chanting of priests, the blowing of conch shells, all of these create a sonic environment that transforms the space, that prepares the devotee for encounter with the sacred. In Australia, the Aboriginal traditions speak of the dreaming a time before time, when ancestral beings walked the land and sang it into shape. Each feature of the landscape, every rock, every waterhole, every hill and valley came into being through song and remains connected to the song that created it. To know the song is to know the land. To walk the songline is to participate in the original act of creation, to resang the world into existence. These are not metaphors. For Aboriginal Australians, the songs are literally constitutive of reality. A sacred site is sacred not because humans have designated it so, but because a sacred song was sung there by an ancestral being, and the singing left a mark that can be perceived by those who know how to perceive it. The land is a temple, but it is a temple of sound as much as a temple of stone, a temple that exists in the singing, that comes alive when the songs are sung, that sleeps when the songs fall silent. Tonight, let us build a temple of sound. Let us close our eyes and let the visible world fade, making room for the audible. Listen to your own breath. This is the first sound, the foundation of the temple. In, out, in, out. The rhythm that has sustained you since the moment of your birth, that will sustain you until the moment of your death. The breath is a mantra, a sacred syllable spoken by the body, repeated without effort, carrying you through time. Listen to your heartbeat. This is the second sound, the drum that keeps the rhythm of your life. Lub-dub, lub-dub. The heart is the musician, the timekeeper, the steady pulse against which all other sounds are measured. Without this beat, silence. Without this rhythm, nothing. Now, beyond your own body, listen to the sounds of the night. Perhaps traffic in the distance, the mechanical hum of civilization. Perhaps wind in the trees, the ancient music of air and leaf. Perhaps crickets or frogs, the chorus that has sung the summer nights for millions of years. Perhaps only silence, which is not the absence of sound, but the presence of sounds too quiet to consciously hear. All of these sounds are the walls of your temple. They create a space around you, a sonic architecture that is unique to this moment, that has never existed before and will never exist again. This temple will not last. It is dissolving even as you perceive it, changing with each passing second, giving way to new sounds, new configurations, new sacred spaces. And this is the teaching of the Temple of Sound, that the sacred is not permanent, is not fixed, does not require stone or marble or enduring form. The sacred can be as ephemeral as a breath, as brief as a bell's ring, as passing as a prayer spoken and released into the air. What matters is not duration, but presence. What matters is not preservation, but participation. What matters is that, in this moment, you are in the temple, and the temple is in you. Let the sounds carry you now, as they have carried devotees since the first chant was chanted, the first mantra spoken, the first song sung to bring the world into being. The temple of sound is always available, always open, always waiting for someone to enter through the doorway of listening. You are entering now. You have been welcomed. Rest in the resonance and let the sacred frequencies carry you into sleep. Our journey ends where all journeys end within. The mystics of every tradition teach that the ultimate temple is not made with hands, that the sacred space we seek in stone and sound is finally found in the chamber of the heart. We have traveled far tonight. We We have witnessed the first stone laid in ancient silence, wandered through jungles that swallowed gods, climbed mountains where heaven touched earth. We have descended into carved darkness, crossed shifting sands, balanced on rocks that float on faith. We have entered labyrinths beneath temples, circled stones older than memory, stood at the edge where the sea claims sacred ground. We have painted caves and built temples of sound. All of these were doorways. All of them pointed towards something. They could not contain a presence too vast for walls, too deep for foundations, too eternal for stone that will eventually crumble, and sand that will eventually shift. The temples were fingers pointing at the moon, boats for crossing the river, maps of a territory they could indicate but never encompass. The Christian mystics spoke of the body as a temple of the Holy Spirit, not a metaphor, but a recognition that the divine dwells within the human form, that the most sacred space is the one we carry with us, that no pilgrimage is required to find what has never been absent. The kingdom of heaven is within you, said Jesus, and the contemplatives of 2,000 years have unpacked that teaching, explored its depths, discovered in the inner chamber of the heart a sanctuary more profound than any cathedral. The Sufis of Islam speak of the Kalb, the spiritual heart, which is not the physical organ, but the center of the soul, the place where human and divine meet, the throne of God within the human being. The practices of Sufism, the dhikr, the remembrance of God through repetition of sacred names, are designed to polish this inner temple, to clear away the dust of distraction and forgetfulness, to reveal the mirror that reflects the face of the beloved. In the Hindu tradition, the teaching is even more direct. Atman is Brahman. The individual soul is identical with the cosmic soul. There is no separation between the one who seeks and the one who is sought, between the devotee who enters the temple and the deity who dwells within it. The long pilgrimage, the elaborate rituals, the towering gopurams and carved sanctuaries, all of these are aids for those who have not yet realized, preparations for those who are not yet ready. For the enlightened, every place is the temple, and the temple is nowhere because it is everywhere. In Buddhism, the teaching takes yet another form. There is no self to be saved, no soul to be purified, no inner temple to be discovered, because these concepts themselves are constructions, illusions that perpetuate suffering. And yet, paradoxically, the practices of Buddhism create sacred spaces, meditation halls, stupas. The very body seated in zazen becomes a form of architecture, a structure that supports awakening. The temple is empty, like all things, and in its emptiness, it holds everything. Tonight, after all our traveling, let us finally arrive. Let us enter the inner temple that has been waiting all along, patient as the painted caves, silent as the depths of Ellora, bright as the golden rock at sunset. Close your eyes. Let the outer world recede the room around you, the sounds of the night, the weight of your body on the bed. These do not disappear. They simply move to the background, making space for something else to emerge. Turn your attention inward. Feel the space within your chest, the cavern behind your ribs. This is not a metaphor. There is physical space there, room for breath, room for heartbeat, room for something else that cannot be named but can be felt. This is the inner temple, the sanctuary that you have carried with you through every moment of your life. The walls of this temple are made of presence, of attention, of willingness to simply be here now, without agenda or expectation. They do not need to be built. They arise when attention turns inward. They do not need to be maintained. They exist as long as awareness rests within them. They cannot crumble. They were never solid in the first place. In the center of this temple, something burns. Call it what you will, the light of consciousness, the flame of spirit, the divine spark, the Buddha nature, the Atman, the soul. The names do not matter. What matters is the warmth, the illumination, the sense of something alive and awake at the very core of your being. This light has been burning since before you were born. It will continue burning after your body returns to the earth. It is not personal, not limited to you. It is the same light that burns in every being, the same light that the mystics of every tradition have sought and found and testified to in their different languages. But it is also yours, uniquely yours, the particular way that the universal expresses itself in this form, this body, this moment. Rest here. There is nothing to do, no prayers to say, no rituals to perform, no offerings to make. The temple asks nothing of you except your presence. The light needs nothing from you except your attention. You are not visiting a sacred space. You are recognizing one. You are not creating holiness. You are remembering it. All the temples we have visited tonight, the jungle shrines, the mountain sanctuaries, the carved caves and balanced rocks, were built to help human beings find their way back to this place, to remember what they had forgotten, to feel what they had stopped feeling. The outer temples are training wheels, beautiful and necessary, pointing the way for those who have lost the way. But the destination was always here. The destination was always home. home is where you are now, in the darkness behind your closed eyes, in the stillness of your settling mind, in the warmth of the light that burns at the center of your being. You have traveled far tonight. You have seen wonders. And now, finally, you have arrived. Rest in the inner temple. Let its peace enfold you. Let its silence speak the words that cannot be spoken. The journey is over. The destination is reached. And in the reaching, you discover that you were never away, that the temple was always here, that the sacred never left, that you have been home all along. Sleep now in the sanctuary of your own heart. The temple guards your rest. The light keeps vigil. And in the morning, you will wake, carrying the sacred with you wherever you go.